Hey Ninja lovers, welcome to my channel, a place where we talk about dating and relationships and flirting and sex and everything in between using personality theories such as the Myers Briggs system and the Enneagram system. So today's episode is about fixations, right? What do each of the Myers Briggs personalities, the 16 personalities, because there are 16 in total, what do they think about the most, right? What is it that they're checking on constantly? What are they fixating about from time to time? And look, we all have very similar worries around our finances, education, our career, the future, because that's just the human condition. But what we're trying to do with this episode today is trying to understand how the 16 personalities um, differ from each other, right? There are similarities, but there are also differences. So we're going to pay attention to the differences today. And the intention that I have with today's episode is, of course, this is related to dating, right? I just don't want you to go out on blind dates. I want you to be aware of what your date is thinking of, or at least get a semblance of an idea of what your date is thinking of um, when he or she or they are sitting across the table from you, right? So you need to know what to expect. All right, so let's get right into it. So we start our list with ISTJs and ISFJs, and I have a lot to say about these types because I have one of each in my life whom I observe every day. And so, yeah, so this is going to be based off my observation. So ISTJs and ISFJs are always thinking about their routines, what needs to be done next. And that's how they move through the day with confidence, right? Routines give them that familiarity, that predictability, and they need that because the world outside is pure chaos, right? From the time you wake up, it's just chaos. You have to tidy up your house, and you need to have your car keys in the right place. So they're always like organizing things and setting things right and in their places. Everything has a place, everything needs to have a place, right? So an ISFJ is more people oriented, right? An ISFJ is going to make sure that, they're going to organize the chaos, but since they're more people oriented, they'll make sure that, whatever their routines are, it is, they want to get it done so that your needs are being met, right? Which is great. So they're constantly creating routines and trying to meet the needs of people around them and trying to make things as the environment as stress-free as possible, make sure that everything is functioning properly and like nothing is missing and their co-workers aren't stressing out, and that work is kind of divided fairly amongst the team members and stuff like that, right? So they're all about their routines. So just talk to them about their day and they will go off on a rant, okay? And they love talking about their day, and yeah, as would an ISTJ, right? But they're more self-focused, so they're going to talk about how efficient they are. Like they probably set a timer on everything, the amount of time they spend in like making breakfast, and how they can cut down on that. So they're always thinking about efficiency when they're talking about when they're planning out their routines. They don't want to waste an awful lot of time on menial tasks, right? Like domestic chores and things like that. And when it comes to work, they have a system, right? About how to go about each of their tasks in as little time as possible. An ISTJ is also constantly thinking about whatever threat is looming on the horizon, whether it be a job loss or a medical scare, right? So how to be best prepared for these kind of threats. So that's what they're thinking about all the time, right? So next we have two of my favorite types on the list, which is INFJs and INTJs. And in case you haven't watched my fangirl videos about why I love these types, be sure to watch them. If not, I have more content today about why I love these types, right? INFJs and INTJs are very different from ISFJs and ISTJs, even though they like to organize chaos as much as these two types. They aren't tethered to reality as much as the ISTJs and ISFJs, because ISTJs and ISFJs are going to think about their routines, right? Day-to-day routines, like day-to-day activities, the minutiae, that type of stuff. But with INFJs and INTJs, that type of stuff is actually boring for them, right? They tend to think long term, like 100 days into the future or 365 days into the future, right? They're all about that long term vision, and that's where they dwell primarily in the future, okay? And they prognosticate, they have visions. For example, an INFJ or an INTJ would probably know that, or they would get this vision that your aunt is going to leave your uncle, and then they're going to work backwards. Why would this event happen, and how is it going to pan out? And that's what they're thinking about, right? And what are they going to do with this information, right? Are they going to share it, keep it to themselves, whatever, right? So that's how their brains work actually. It's all about the future, and then they work backwards, right? Figuring out the how and the why, not the what, because they're somehow convinced that the what, the event that's going to happen will happen, and then they have to figure out the how and the why and the when, right? So I mean, they're abstract, okay? So that's the N, the second letter of the four-letter code. That's what it stands for, intuition, and which is they inhabit the world of the abstract, the intangible, right? So in that sense, when they're communicating, the language could be almost very poetic, okay? And you can have deep discussions with them, and by depth I meant they are trying to explore the meaning behind everything, okay? It's like they're studying life and the people, right? And they have a PhD on that. But the way they go about it is kind of different. So an INFJ is your resident therapist, and they're all about they're focusing on the people around them, okay, constantly. They're trying to figure you out all the time, and what your intention is, and basically they're trying to get into the nub of who you are. And you just tell an INFJ that you're stressed, they are going to give you an entire narrative about what is triggering you and why it is triggering you, and kind of related to your childhood trauma, stuff like that, right? So they're very penetrating in that sense. INFJs and INTJs are equally like that. But in my observation, INTJs tend to be more self-focused, like an ISTJ, right? And that's the parallel I've been trying to draw, which is INFJs and ISFJs could be very people-focused, and INTJs and ISTJs could be more self-focused. So an INTJ is going to use their intuition, pulling up all these insights for themselves. What is it that they want to do with their lives, and how are they going to half-ass everything, be efficient, half-ass everything, so that they can sit back and relax, procrastinate, basically. So they're trying to achieve efficiency and productivity in their lives, okay? So they are really focused on that. And again, like when it comes back to like them being poetic and trying to find meaning in everything, trying to investigate the why, um, the what if, right? um, I was talking to this INTJ recently, and I asked him what is true love, and he said true love is admiration, right? But you have to be careful about keeping some distance between you and the object of your admiration. And the example that he used to illustrate this was a lady sitting by a fire on a cold day, right? And she's sort of in a trance, and she's being warmed by these licks of fire, and she's admiring the fire, but she needs to keep that distance between herself and the fire, because while love can be a fuel for keeping you warm and safe and protected, it can also destroy you if you get too close. So be sure to keep that distance between you and the fire. So next we have ESFPs and ESTPs, the most objective types amongst the 16 personality types, the Myers Briggs personality types, in my opinion, because they live in the moment, truly, right? They anchor themselves to reality. So they are the ultimate realists, which is not to say that they don't introspect or dig into the meaning of everything like an INFJ or an INTJ would. But think about it, if you have to be fully present in the moment, right? If you have to think about your date sitting across you, the way their eyes are shaped, or the way the texture of their skin, the way the head on the hair falls on the cheeks, the temperature of the room, the brightness of the room, stuff like that, right? So how are you going to be able to pick up this sensory information if you're constantly thinking about your aunt who's going to move out of your uncle's apartment after their breakup, which will happen like 12 months from now? But yeah, you're not going to be fully present in the moment, right? And ESFPs and ESTPs shun that kind of stuff, right? Because they like to experience life. Life to them is a heap of experiences and sensations, right? That's how they look at it. And no two experiences are the same, because once you start drawing similarities between your experiences and you begin introspecting and use all these insights to look at the patterns, okay, between your different experiences, you tend to get subjective, right? You tend to build this narrative in your head, and that is what these types shun the most, right? Building a narrative in your head, being subjective, because once you start building narratives in your head, you're not going to want to experience life, especially if it's a negative experience. So you're not going to go out and re-experience it, because you are afraid you're going to trigger yourself more. And so you're going to avoid the experience. So an ESFP or an ESTP wouldn't do that, because they do not want to eliminate the experiences that they have, because then they would stop to live, right? Because you have, I mean, that's how their brains are wired. Life is experiences, so you have to experience it and not get subjective and not build these narratives. And that's why they are some of the most objective types amongst the 16 personality types. I'm just looking into my notes so I don't miss anything. So yeah, suffice to say that the world outside of themselves is their playing field, and not the one that they're building between their ears, right? Which is what most introverts do. So what are these types most likely to think about? Food and sex, baby. And to not get bored by filling their lives with sensory experiences, right? Going out there, living life, living in the moment, and picking up on all the sensory information, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the taste, and the touch. Because otherwise, life is boring and it sucks. So I filmed this segment of the video yesterday, but I wasn't really happy with what I had produced. And so I'm reshooting it, and hopefully I get it right this time. So shout out to you, ENFPs and ENTPs, if you're watching this. Let me know if I nailed it. So I am an INFP, and psychologically speaking, the way my mind works is very similar to that of an ENFP. Just note that I use the word similar and not the same, because an ENFP would be an INFP on steroids, particularly those parts of me that are subdued. If they're roided up, then I'd be an ENFP, and that side of me comes out when I am soused to my eyeballs. Okay, so anywho, it's fascinating, right? There are some of the most enthusiastic, most optimistic types amongst the Myers Briggs personality types, and there's good reason for it. It's because they are explorers. Psychologically, they indulge in exploration, right? Not the physical world necessarily. They're not sybarites seeking sensory feedback from the outside world like ESTPs and ESFPs, but they dwell in the abstract, right? Because that's the second letter N, abstraction or intuition, of the 4-letter code. So their minds are basically like vacuum cleaners, right? Sucking in fact after fact after fact after fact. So that's what they're exploring: ideas, theories, philosophies, all this information. And the reason they do it is because they like to form connection between things, right? Most importantly, they form connections amongst disparate things, right? Things, somehow they kind of find those connections, those associations, and they get a high from it, and they tend to do that constantly. I mean, if you think about it, that's how innuendos are birthed, really. I mean, I remember this one time I was talking to an ENTP, and he was talking about barbecuing chicken, and the entire time I was very convinced that he was talking about sex. Anyway, so yeah, back to ENFPs and ENTPs. Being enthusiastic, open to life. I mean, they're just seeking all these possibilities, okay, constantly, and they have hyperactive imaginations. I mean, an ENFP or an ENTP could be walking and notice a shoe on the road, and then they could think about, like, how did the shoe come there? I mean, end up there, and what's the story behind it? The person who was wearing it, I mean, what's his story? Like, how did he lose that shoe? Was he in a physical fight with his spouse in the house? And in that case, I mean, did they marry out of force or coercion? What led to that fight? Or was there an intruder who broke into the house, and then that got this person leaving in a hurry, and that's how he lost his shoe? So it's like all these arcs, right? And they kind of like take birth within the mind, and they're all going off on different tangents, different arcs, like a spider web, and somehow you try to connect everything together. And that's what their minds primarily engage in, right? Possibilities. And there's never a firm conclusion, okay? Everything is open-ended. They're explorers. They're extrapolating things, not concluding things like an INFJ or an INTJ would, right? Because for an INFJ and INTJ, it's really important to get to the nub of an issue, right? But and that's how they gain their confidence, by reducing things to that one single thing, that one single truth, But for an ENFP or an ENTP, there could be several million, 100 billion, bajillion truths out there, right? And that's how I tend to think too. And I guess that's how an INTP mind would also be very similar, an INFP and INTP mind, right? Conclusions aren't good for us. We like to keep things open-ended, and that's how we invite people into conversation with us, right? By keeping things open-ended, by welcoming new possibilities. So, and I mean, I guess that's why ENFPs and ENTPs could come across as having this youthful vigor to them, even into their old ages. It's just because they're so open-minded. And yes, which means to say that when they embrace newness, they also embrace uncertainty and chaos. And because they think that chaos is life, right? Life cannot be organized. It cannot be reduced to one single truth. It is complex. And ENFPs and ENTPs like to navigate the spider web, right? I'm meandering right now, so let me stay on track. So ENFPs and ENTPs, what do they detest? What's anathema to them is rigidity, the tried and tested, conventionality, routines, because they hate being in a box, right? So don't ever talk to them about their routines or their plans for the future. They're not going to, I mean, plans for the future for sure, like they could have, multiple ideas around that, but don't ask them about their routines and what is that one dream job they'd like to do for the rest of their life, like day in and day out, like something mundane, something that's kind of fixed, okay? Because they're all about variability, right? So yeah, but there's differences here, even though ENFPs and ENTPs think about the next new shiny theory or the next new shiny object, and they'd like to talk about it because that's what they're thinking about all the time. An ENTP is going to be looking at the logic, the framework or the logic on which whatever idea or principle is built upon. And that's how they're going to filter things out, and they're going to like to argue their way out of a philosophy by looking at the logic that kind of, buttresses it. Whereas if you look at an ENFP could be more interested in looking at it from their own subjective lens. If they like this idea, if they're able to find some sort of relatability to it, if it resonates with them. So that's how they're going to differ, because ENFPs, the F, the third letter, is not necessarily like emotions, but it's more like what is it that they value. So ENFPs are going to check in with themselves to see if they like an idea, if they're able to relate to it, whereas an ENTP is going to be looking at the logic, if it makes sense to them, if it is something sensible, okay? So when you're having conversations with them, don't talk about the what is, okay? Always the what ifs, because that is super interesting, okay? Possibilities, right? That's what I told you. So that's what they're thinking about. So random facts, the what ifs, and if you need some inspiration, then on how to flirt with ENFPs or ENTPs, then you should probably check Nas Daily, his videos. He's an ENFP for sure. And coming back to the what ifs, like what if all the lions disappeared from the face of this planet, and what if the moon collided with the earth, things like that, right? That type of stuff would fascinate ENFPs and ENTPs. Folks, I'd like to hear your thoughts and your feelings and your sensations to today's episode. So leave me some text here, or if you want to send a video or a GIF, however you'd like to express yourself, you can reach me by email. My email is emailloveninja@gmail.com. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel so I can make a career out of this. Alright, until next time, don't get complacent. Love you, love me, love Ninja.